So I just want to welcome everybody to our seminar for this afternoon. As if you've done these with us before, you know that you can type in questions in the Q&A, and when we have the opportunity, we will begin asking them. So feel free to type them in anytime as we're going, and we will get to them at some point. Did you find your presentation, Todd?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we'll find out in a few minutes.
All right, so it is my pleasure today to introduce two people who are joining us. So Dr. Lindsay Keith Vincent, Associate Dean for Research and Outreach in the College of Education here at Louisiana Tech, who will be part of the discussion. And Dr. Todd Brown, who has many titles and accolades, and I'm going to read an old bio and let him fill in the rest since then. But sort of a brief intro of Todd. I met Todd through a random email after listening to a podcast where I heard Dr. Sabetti talk about this really neat pandemic simulation for kids called Operation Outbreak. So I found him online and sent him an email, and he very quickly wrote me back, which was quite surprising. Then we found that we have some things in common. Louisiana is one of them, and the Florida Gators. So we hit it off right away. And but in addition to being a new friend and collaborator with me and Dr. Vincent, Todd has a doctorate of higher education, is the winner of the Ignite Education Innovation Award, multiple Teacher of the Year awards, a Congressional Teacher of the Year award, and a nominee for the CNN Heroes Award by Harvard University. He has also been selected as a Sustainable Developmental Goals Ambassador for the UN. He was selected for a year-long fellowship with the CDC. You wrote this, so it better be right, Todd.
It actually sounds pretty impressive.
I'm feeling even more impressed now that you're friends with me. It was a first place finisher for the Henry Ford Innovator Award, and he tells me this is a bit dated, so there are probably many more awards to his name. So today he's going to share with us what he's done, what Operation Outbreak is, and hopefully engage in an exciting conversation about what we're sort of experiencing, what we've learned, and where we can go from here. So thank you, Todd, and thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for having me. You're very brave having me on live, I can tell you that. And as far as the bio goes, I live by the rule that never let the truth get in the way of a good story. So that's something to keep in mind as you're writing your own bios. So yeah, no, it's funny because you, like you said, you heard a podcast, you reached out by email, and then we kind of connected, and you introduced me to people, and now before you know it, we're working together, and it's kind of like that's actually how I got involved with Dr. Pardis Sabetti over at the Broad Institute and Sabetti Lab. Crazy enough, my daughter, who was 6 at the time, she's an education freak, which is fantastic. Years ago, she wanted to she liked me to read bedtime stories like a lot of parents do, and my wife bought a Time magazine that was written about the most influential and supposedly best, if you want to call them, the most amazing scientists in the history of the world. And then they also had some people in there that were contemporary scientists. So it was both historical and contemporary. We were flipping through. I was actually reading as a bedtime story, and Dr. Pardis Sabetti was in there, and my daughter thought she was like the coolest person in the world. So I reached out to her because of this magazine article to see if she'd be willing to send my daughter an autographed copy or an autographed picture. And then we just kind of hit it off by email, just like we're doing. And here we are 6 years later, and just a bunch of amazing, crazy things have been happening. And now we're kind of in the midst of this, pandemic. And it's scary to think that we were talking and doing things about this, almost about over a half a decade ago. And now here we are.
Yeah, I like that story a lot, because I think it really does show the students the importance of sort of just networking. And networking sometimes sounds like a bad word, but part of these seminars is really to teach students that leads to good things, right? If you're passionate about something and someone else shares that passion.
Yeah, I don't think you can overstate the importance of social capital, right? Don't be afraid to reach out. My wife always says, it's always a no unless you ask. And And it's the truth. I bother people all the time, and I get plenty of no's. But it's still worth it because you never know. You just never know, and you never know where it'll lead. So we're very fortunate to have worked with a lot of different people now. So yeah. And now with Louisiana Tech, which is so cool. I'm from Baton Rouge, so being from Louisiana, most of my family's in Monroe. I went to Neville High School and all that. So it's just a really cool opportunity. So yeah, it's amazing.
All right, go for it. Tell us about Operation Outbreak.
Okay, yeah. So what am I doing here? Wait, why are we, okay. So listen, so this is what we did. So I was teaching civics, middle school civics, 7th grade at the time. And this was during the 14-15 Ebola outbreak in West Africa. And my kids were coming into class, not my kids, but my students, because that would be terrible. My kids were coming into the class very, very curious, hesitant, scared, paranoid about what was going on in West Africa as things started to heat up and really get crazy. I was getting a lot of questions about it. And really, I have to be honest, I didn't know that much. So I started looking into it more, trying to answer questions, shifting kids towards different reputable sites and scientists that were involved. And then thought, you know what, I'm teaching a government unit right now. We're looking at levels of government and things of that nature. Why don't I craft the units that we're involved in and look at it through a different lens and look at it actually through an epidemic or a potential pandemic, and we started looking at how would something transpire here in the United States? What level of government is responsible for what, who funds who, how does this all work? What does the CDC do? So we started doing that, and it really took off. The kids really latched on to it, and they really were driving the lessons with new questions and new directions. So after we started getting to a point where we were winding it down a little bit, they were so engaged that I thought, it's a shame when you have a student that is so engaged with what you're teaching. It's tough to let it go. So what I thought is, let's learn about all of these things, and then let's engage the students in a different way. Let's use this experiential learning model, and why don't we see if you can do what you think you're supposed to do, and put your knowledge in a skill-based activity. So we simulated an outbreak on our campus. We had 200 kids, and I started thinking, okay, so what groups do we need? So we need a government, we need a military, we need a body team, epidemiologist, triage, we need a media, we need a general population. So we actually simulated an outbreak of Ebola on our campus. And we gave it about 3 hours or so, and we used stickers. We used this sticker-based system to spread the disease. And there were rules, but they were moderately loose. We wanted to give the kids an opportunity to just run with it and see what happened, which is scary because you know what you hope for, but you don't know if it's going to work out, especially with that scale of involvement with a lot of people. And it actually went moderately well. A little clunky because we had stickers and it was interesting. But that's when I actually reached out to Dr. Party Sabetti and said, this is what we were going to do. This is kind of how it came out. And to be honest, you could tell that it was like, oh, that's cute. That sounds fun. But then when I sent over all of the information and pictures and everybody in PPE and we went full scale, very immersive, she got really interested and started kind of helping drive the bus. Okay, so this is what needs to be done. This is kind of how we need to look at it the next time around. And then it's evolved, and now we've developed an app. So the app, basically what it does, it spreads a pathogen via Bluetooth through electronic devices. So we can program the app to replicate any R value or not, mortality, things of that nature, and then let it run its course. So we've elevated it to be as realistic as possible, but in a safe environment. And that's important, so you can really become immersed in an activity. And we found out that the behavior patterns with our middle school kids, we're seeing that now, actually, and what's happening in the pandemic within the United States, which is good in a way because it's predictable, but it's very scary that we are seeing some of these behaviors being mirrored by adults that were being exhibited by 7th grade kids. So, you know, we got into that perspective, and I'm going to show you something real quick, if you don't mind. Hopefully I don't butcher this, because I'm going to share this real quick.
You should be able to share.
Okay, so let me, so share, let me pull this up. Can anybody, I don't know if I'm sharing here. Hold on, give me a second here.
Very good.
Okay, is it good? We're good?
Yep.
I'm going to go through real quick, because I think since we're in this world now, not that it's contemporary, since we're in this world of conspiracy theories, I want to show how it happens, and it's interesting, specifically with what we did. So this is our first paper or article we wrote for Wired magazine, Dr. Kalubri, myself, and Dr. Sabetti. And if you notice, it was on 3/13/2019, so March 13th. Crazy enough, this is 1 year to the exact date that our president declared a national state of emergency because of COVID, to the exact date 1 year later. And what makes this crazy is, so in September, I was in China teaching this. So September of 2019, I was in China. And then to make it a little crazier, in December, we ran our Operation Outbreak at Sarasota Military Academy Prep, a middle school in Sarasota, Florida. And what we chose is we chose a SARS mutation with a reproductive number between 2 and 3, and about 50% of the cases are asymptomatic. So when you think about it, that we wrote this article 1 year to the day, I was in China, we picked a SARS mutated virus with the same, roughly the same numbers as we're saying what COVID is. This is how conspiracy, like I literally heard a podcast in which they were insinuating our team was somehow involved in COVID, which is horrifying to think. But you know, we start to see things and see patterns develop, and we make these assumptions, and that's exactly what we saw with our kids. They make assumptions that aren't necessarily actually, you know, factual, but it's based on these leaps, these intellectual leaps, and sometimes that can be good, sometimes not so much. So I'll get out of this real quick, and go. I only have 111 slides to go, but don't worry, most of them.
Better start talking fast then, Todd.
Well, most of it's just writing. There's no pictures, so I figured that would be no. No, so you know we're in this situation now, and what's horrifying to some extent is one of the greatest existential crises or threats to the human race is disease, and when you think about it, we have a practice at this every year, right? The flu season comes around every year, and it bounces around all different countries all around the world. So it may not be simultaneous like we're seeing now with COVID, but we see these same types of flare-ups. We see these same types of things happening. And you would think we would probably be better off at dealing with what is happening than we actually are. And I used to get frustrated. I used to be like, how is that possible? How can the world, how can, you know, United States, Florida, whatever, how can this happen? And then it really hit me that, you know, a lot of this that's going on, it's because people just don't know, right? When were you taught about this specifically in a school? And if you were, at what age was it, and how long was the teaching? You know, you really don't learn about these types of things until you get older, and it's very specific and maybe even compartmentalized. And that becomes a real issue because people are doing things, saying things, acting certain ways because of ignorance, right? They just didn't know. They had no idea. And that's a problem. And we're focusing a lot right now you know, how education is delivered. We're forced into that hole right now. How can we change the way it's delivered because of COVID? But you know, it's interesting. There's not a whole lot of talk, which always amazes me, of what is being delivered. Right? We're in the middle of this pandemic, and it's very little that you hear or read about people saying, why aren't we teaching things like this? Why aren't we giving an opportunity for people to empower themselves to help themselves, their family, and communities? It's how are we going to do it instead of what are we doing about it? And that's interesting. And I think that's kind of where our Operation Outbreak really gets into the see a need, fill a need type situation, you know, and I think too that as I'm just rambling on, if you have a question, anybody has a question, please ask, or I'll just talk forever. You know, the other thing too is I look at a lot of times with pandemics, outbreaks, public health, and people always think I'm crazy, which, you know, it makes me think of, so I read a lot, I watch, you know, whatever, but I'm fascinated, and this sounds terrible, with serial killers. And that's a whole separate, you know, that's a whole separate counseling session. But here's the thing. We see a lot of mirroring going on. And I'm being serious, and it sounds weird, but so I don't know if anybody knows this. I love telling stories, so this is important. So Ted Bundy, after Lake Sammamish, he kidnaps and kills people at Lake Sammamish. He has a dinner party with friends, okay? Like he goes over and he cooks. I don't know if I know, Ted Bundy is supposed to be a pretty good cook. Whatever. And on the TV is a artist rendering of the person responsible, they think was responsible for this horrible thing he did at Lake Sammamish. It looks like him. His eye color is described as the same. His hair color, his height, he's driving the same car. And somebody overheard him talking to one of the females that disappeared and used the name Ted. And no one at the dinner party called the police. They didn't. They're like, yeah, right. Like, yeah, right, sure. That's gonna happen. You know, like you're really the killer. No way. And this is how it falls into public health and infectious disease. Skepticism is the luxury of the unaffected. So I'm not directly affected by what he potentially had done. So there's that's not a big deal. And we see this now, right? I don't know anybody that got sick. I don't know anybody that's been on a ventilator. I don't know anybody who's died. I don't know if it's really that serious. Ignoring what's happening around in a larger capacity. And that becomes, a real issue. And then on top of that, so the Night Stalker, this is like a serial killer podcast, the Night Stalker in LA. He attacks the person, and as he's leaving, gets pulled over by the police and is pulled out of a car and is going to be arrested potentially. Puts his hands on the hood of a car. Okay. The policeman goes back to his motorcycle to get a citation, whatever he's doing. Richard Ramirez runs. He just takes off. He gets away in the night. And he had traced a pentagram, which they know was at some of these places where he had committed these murders, on the hood. He drew it with his finger. So they impound the car. The police, for the detectives that are investigating, asked to get the car out of impound so they can fingerprint. The group that had impounded, the LAPD, says, nah, we'll get to it. And they didn't get to it for like a month. And they had impounded the car outside. So by the time it was fingerprinted, there was nothing there because it was in the summer in LA and it's 9,000 degrees and everything had burned off, so it's gone. What does that have to do with public health? Well, you get these competing organizations. I'll do it. I'll take responsibility. I want some of the glory. Look what I can do. And now we start seeing the same thing in public health, right? Oh, that's the state's responsibility. Why didn't the federal government do that? Oh, you know what? That's that county. Or you know what? Maybe if I sequence something, I could, I don't know, patent it. Maybe I could try to figure out a way and I could make money off of it. So we start to see these similarities of groups butting heads. And then on the outside, you have people that deniers, and all of this comes back to education. When were you taught about it? Never, as far as I could tell you. I never was taught about this kind of stuff in school. And that's an issue. That's a real issue. And it needs to be addressed. If not, we're going to spin our wheels every time something like this comes around. And it's coming back around. We haven't even finished this one, and it's going to come back around. So,
that's really interesting because, you know, your Operation Outbreak simulation and app, which I hope you can show us some of the dashboards that you've shown and talk through that. I get the conspiracy theory, but it's people who work in infectious disease knew this was coming. And Dr. Sabetti is an epidemiologist, right, who sort of monitors these situations. Like, people knew this was going to be the next sort of outbreak that we had. So that does, you're right, it goes back to education. And I never learned about any of this. And I have a PhD in biology, and this was not in my area. And so I never learned about it. So I think certainly how we educate now is so important. And although students right now are living it, so maybe if anything, this is the opportunity to teach them and empower them to do the right thing now and in the future, because like you said, it will hopefully not something quite this severe in their lifetime, but they have the potential to see that and be a part of a solution.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what this is about, right? Empowering people to do what they know is right in order to help change the larger scale movement of the virus itself. You know, people talk about that, and I've said this quite a bit. This isn't necessarily a scientific thing. It's more, or a biological thing. It's more of a sociological thing. But here's the situation. If you don't have some kind of scientific understanding or biological understanding of how this all plays out, then from a sociological standpoint, and your behaviors are going to be different than probably what they should be because of lack of understanding at the basic biology level. So that, you know, that's important. And you brought that a good point up too, is, you know, when we did this whole conspiracy craziness, they're like, oh my God, you know, I can't believe you were doing this. And it's like you predicted some of this stuff. There's no prediction. I mean, I'd be predicting the lottery before I'd be predicting, you know, simulations in middle school. We just paid attention. Right? Outbreaks are happening all over the world, everywhere, all the time. So we just started paying attention and realizing this is important. This affects everyone. So why don't we teach these things? And you can teach them in any class. You can teach this stuff in any class, right? You've got communication, you've got language barrier, you've got your basic, you know, biology, you've got even chemistry involved, definitely government history, civics. I mean, it all falls into place. It's just a matter of being, I don't want to say brave or adventurous enough, but to shift a little bit of how we look at things that we're teaching and put it into a little bit different terms, or again, a different lens. Let me, I'm going to share again, because this is actually kind of fun. Hold on, shares. Okay, let me pull this up. Okay, are we good? Yes? Let me get through, okay, so this is it. This was in November of 2019. That was, as of November of 2019, that's how many outbreaks had taken place in the world. And this is, the size of the dot would be how large the outbreak is or was. And then yellow to orange to red would be the severity. So we didn't come up with anything that was groundbreaking predictive. It was just paying attention. I mean, this happens all the time. You know, the other thing too, when you talk about, I'll show you the quick thing as I go through this. This is the other thing too, is because so my dissertation is computational sociology. So looking at human behaviors as a living organism, as how. So for instance, I looked at how my friends influence my academic performance. So, because we have teachers that say all the time, oh, that kid was a great kid, and then they got around the wrong people and their grades went in the toilet. But did they really? Did those people actually have any impact on my grades, my core grades? And that's what I looked at. So, so this is, you know, this is just showing some crazy stuff. But we've seen this, and this is actually some of the stuff is from Yale, Dr. Kostakis, looking at social organisms. And smoking, obesity, voting, depression, divorce, bad mood, all of this is impacted by your environment and surroundings and the people that you are friends with in certain degrees. I mean, so depending on how you're responding to this pandemic may be based on your environment and who you're around. So that's something that you have to keep in mind. I'll get through. Oh, look at that. This is actually a picture of our first outbreak. This is historical right here. So these are our stickers. You would be given a card. So if you were infected and you had to report to the triage with the doctors, they would be able to see certain things that you had taken, that you had done, I guess you could call it, so they could start to track and understand what was happening as far as symptoms, travel, things of that nature. And then again, we moved into our app. The difference is now we have all new app faces. It's a far more complex situation, which I'll show you. I'll show you soon. The other thing too is so the bottom right here, the dead. That was a little tone deaf because we hadn't lived through this pandemic type situation that we're in. So now we have to be far more sensitive from a mental health standpoint. And when we work with kids and people of all ages, really, I can tell you now, I've had 3 people I know have died from COVID. So we need to be a little bit more understanding, empathetic, and so we've changed a lot of this, which I'll show you if we have time. So this is the other thing I want to show you right before I get to the dashboard and some of the other stuff. Disease is unlike any other existential threat on Earth, and I get yelled at all the time, and that's fine. I'm sure I will. If I recycle, I'm one of 8 billion people recycling. How much impact does that have on the world? It's not that it doesn't, but when you really think about it, if I'm the only one, how much difference does it make? I don't know, debatable. But disease, if I'm one person and I don't do what I'm supposed to do, I can have a huge impact on the community around me. I can become a super spreader, right? And this is the MERS outbreak in 2015. Look at these 3 squares. Look at the people. These are 3 people in all the cases, all the contacts now from these 3 people. So if all 3 of these people, or even 2 of these people, did something different in their behavior, think about how much different the transmission rates may have been. So as an individual, I can have an enormous impact on my community. So let's look at COVID in South Korea. I mean, look at these 3 people, right? These 3 people, they're accounting for almost 2,000 contacts. So again, doing the right thing based on knowledge that you gain through teaching and understanding what behavior should be exhibited changes the course potentially of an outbreak on a lot of different levels. So this is what we started with. So the app itself is fun. It can spread disease. It can give you symptoms. It's very interactive. And this is where we started from. We started to where we can collect anonymized data. So we can start to see who was infected, who spread it to who recovers. We can start to see super spreader trees. And then we can also, at this bottom left here, or bottom right, we can start to look at observed cases versus our simulation, what we looked at from a mathematical model. So the blue is what was supposed to happen, but then the red is actually what happened. So then now we can start saying, okay, we've time-stamped this information. So now we can start going back in time and think, okay, so what actually happened? What behaviors were being exhibited throughout the simulation that changed the mathematical modeling? How did, we know what we predicted, we know what was supposed to happen, but it didn't. So why? Or did it match? So we know. So we can have this retrospective infection patterns that we can really monitor. One of the largest ones we did was actually during COVID this past summer in Chicago. We had social distance ambassadors. We had about 2,000 high school college-age kids that were social ambassadors that were going around the city of Chicago explaining to people why they need to wear a mask and social distance. And it was based a lot on our curriculum that we have put together. And then we had an actual simulation within the social ambassadors in the city for a week, 2,000 people over the course of 7 days, to see if they were actually practicing what they were preaching. And we seeded each group. There were 3 boroughs around the city. So it was north, south, and east, I think. And we seeded each one with a few infections to see what would happen. So then we could start tracking and see if there were actual transmissions, the result of the transmissions were people doing what they were supposed to do or practicing what they were preaching. So then we could go back with that data and go, listen, you actually did a really good job considering what was going on. And that's that kind of real world learning that's so important as you go through. And I mentioned the curriculum. We have a textbook, 15-chapter textbook. We have a science curriculum, a governance curriculum that's middle school and high school. We are in the process of putting together, working with Crash Course, if anybody knows John Hank Green. We're working with them for a 15-part series on outbreak science with Crash Course. It'll complement the textbook and the curriculum itself. What we did too with the app is we actually put in quizzes. So we can launch quizzes remotely that tie the simulation back into the learning for the students from a classroom. So we can, based on how many questions that you get correct, you can earn things like PPE or a mask that will interfere with the Bluetooth signal within the app to keep you healthier for longer. So we have some of these things to make sure we tie into with curriculum. I want to show you the dashboard real quick here. I may have to stop sharing and reshare. But so I want to show you this real quick, and then hopefully we have some questions as I'm just rambling on here.
Todd, can I ask while you look for that, how did those ambassadors in Chicago do? Do you do better if they're teaching, or because they're like, that's what they're supposed to communicate, or?
Yeah, they actually did really, really well. One borough had 0 transmissions. So when you think 2,000 divided by 3, 650 people over a week, and they had 0 transmissions, that's crazy to think how great a job they did, especially considering age group. When we look at age groups.
Do you know how many in each group you infected?
We seeded 2 to start with in each group.
Okay.
So very small number, but as you'll see in this video or this dashboard, we seeded 4 in this dashboard with 358 people, and watch how crazy it is. It's a good example of how not to behave, to be honest. So let me show you.
Because the app on their phone tells them that they've been infected, right? Or okay.
Totally. Yeah, so the app will progress. If you've been infected, it will let you know. Visually, it'll let you know. You can touch the screen and you'll actually list your symptoms that you're experiencing. And through an algorithm, it'll progress you through to either more severe to eventually possibly death. You may recover. The other thing we're putting in is false negatives, or false positives, I should say. So what ends up happening is you're sick, but you're not sick with the actual pathogen that's circulating, just like it is in the real world. So we add this level of complexity. And then now we have QR codes. So what ends up happening is you can scan a QR code and vaccinate your phone. You can scan your phone and you can run a test. You can run an actual diagnostic to tell you if you're positive or negative. So we have a bunch of different layers to the simulation that we can run within a classroom, or as we've talked about with hundreds and thousands of people, and we can go from 45 minutes to weeks. And I'll show you what happens when we look.
Sorry, one more question, because I'm familiar with it, but the people watching are less familiar with it. So then people, like if I was infected and then I went and hung out with Lindsay and she had the app, she would become infected, right? So the 2 people who were infected did the right thing and stayed home or left their phones at home. But let's assume they stayed home with their phones. And so because it's like a 6-foot, or I don't know how far Bluetooth works, but within a proximity.
Yeah. So the app, depending on what pathogen has been selected, if you want to call it that, or built, just because you're infected doesn't necessarily mean you're going to infect the person running the app as well. Because we look at it as, not every person that's positive with COVID infects every other person. So it's very realistic. And it does work up to 10 feet. So we can also adjust the Bluetooth signal itself. So for instance, if we're running something like that's more contact based, we can shrink the signal to be literally about a foot. So you can't infect anyone outside of 1 foot, whereas we can do something with COVID or there's something that's airborne and we can extend that much greater. So I'll show you, and this is the next evolution of what we're doing as far as the information that, okay, we can see this, correct? We're good?
Yep.
Okay, so this is, so we have 358 participants in this simulation. This was in COVID. This was this past year over Halloween weekend. This was in a university out west. So we had 358 people. Participants are all here on the right. We'll have the number of infected, recovered, vaccinated, and deceased here on the left, and they will be color-coded. Down here, where there's nothing at this point, the bottom left is infection pathways. So we'll start to see super spreaders. If they were to occur, we will see these events registered down here on the bottom left. As you've seen here on the bottom, we have, this is hour by hour of activity starting on Thursday at 6 p.m. running all the way through the Halloween weekend. These varying levels are basically interactions. So the higher the level of interaction, the higher the metric or higher the bar. Same with the red. These are infections. So we have participants. These dashed lines are proximity readings. So the longer the proximity reading, the further they are away, up to 10 feet, the closer the proximity or the smaller the line, meaning the closer they are. So if I start to play this, so we can start to see how many people are starting to interact. So it looks like it's all right, but it's also 3, 4 a.m. As we start to get back into the day, we start to see a huge amount of interaction and we start to see spread. Now, I'll stop it here, and there's a couple of reasons why. We start to see a super spreader emerge. If you look at the bottom left, there's a super spreader. We can click, and I can see who that super spreader was right there. And then if we go back, I can start to click and see who's infected or who's uninfected, how long they had interaction with people, how long they've had interaction with people at that specific point in time. We can also see how many contacts they've had and how many contacts they will have. I can also click on different people here. Let me find somebody. Give me a second. So this person
they will have, that's based on like modeling their behavior in the past, like over time, this is how many more people they're likely to interact with.
Yeah, this is, yeah, so this is actual, these are actually people, human behavior. So now I know, so I can click on this. Some of these people are a little different. So this person will be infected. So we could actually just watch and track this person until they're infected and then know who infected them and who they are infecting afterwards. And we can start looking at contacts. I mean, keep in mind, this is in COVID. Like, this is in the COVID world. This is Halloween weekend. These people were supposed to not do this. So you start seeing people with 57 contacts, 34 contacts. I know there's somebody in here that had 97 contacts. 97 contacts in basically 3 days.
And they also, so one, they weren't supposed to because we're in a pandemic, but two, they knew they had this app and they knew that on the app they were infected.
Totally, totally. And what's amazing about this is I'll just take this guy out if I can catch him. What is amazing about this, this doesn't look good right here. Good golly. There you go, 79 of 98 contacts. But what's incredible about this kind of stuff is that then we can produce data and give individuals real number of contacts. We can create what we can give them a health score, and it's based on, and it's terrible to say it this way, but it's real, social promiscuity, right? I mean, that's what it is. You're being, the social butterfly is the super spreader potentially, right? So not only do they may not have any understanding of how many contacts they had, because we'll ask people in like this simulation, and they'll say, oh yeah, 22. And you go, actually 78. They're like, oh, you don't, sometimes you're not consciously aware. And it's hard to alter behavior when you're not aware of what is actually going on. So there's value in that. The other thing that we can do with this dashboard, or we will be able to do soon, is that was COVID, and that was with these 358 people. We will be able to run that exact same simulation so you can watch it again. But what we do now is we stop it and we take COVID out of it. And then we insert COVID, maybe a new variant of COVID, and then watch it and click it again and watch how the same exact interactions with the same number of people would change the spread based on what the pathogen is. We could also stop it and now insert 60% of those people are wearing masks. 20% of those people have been vaccinated, and watch how things change. So you can now base modeling off of behavior. Simple. And that's hugely valuable. And we can do that with any simulation, any pathogen, any intervention, all of that. And it also starts to give us a better understanding of vaccine rollout. What would be the most beneficial way? Who do we vaccinate when? How many, if we have a scarcity, how do we use these best? And we can do this with testing too. So we start to see how to test people and who to test, when to test them, and get a better understanding of these transmission events, if they occur, if they don't occur. So it's really valuable information.
So there is a question here, if I can get to my questions. I'm having, I don't know, I need it to be bigger. Can't read them when they're tiny. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay. Have issues. So this Operation Outbreak is what has given you infection patterns, how a few people spread diseases to thousands, etc. And where exactly does the app fit into these real life things? Does it work with the Bluetooth to keep track of people with the app? Yeah, you just walk us through that a little bit more, good, because they don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So it's anonymized. So we aren't tracking you as an individual and know that you are Jamie, but we know that you are part of the simulation. So can we do that? Yes, but we're hypersensitive to privacy. That's hugely important. So what we do is it's a permission-based system. If you don't want to be known, it's very simple. We haven't done anything at this point where we identify individuals by name or by IP or anything like that. So the app itself is run so we have a group of students, a school, or a city that decides that they want to run the simulation and they can run the app. You can download the app. We give you a specific code so we know who is part of what simulation. That simulation is built based on what infectious disease or what pathogen has been chosen, number of people, a range of number of people, and also duration. And we do that for a lot of different reasons. One is because it gives us a better understanding of the data that's being produced. And then the other thing is, and we had done this, we had a meeting, which I never even thought about. We had a meeting with the FBI, so Weapons of Mass Destruction Division. And their concern, which you always have to look at it as, how can I screw this up? Or how can I use this the wrong way? Their concern is people getting the app and running a simulation in order to better understand how to create the most efficient bioterrorist attack. And you have to think about that. So that's why it's it's code-based. It's very specific. You can't just download the app anywhere and just play with it. It has to always go through us so we can monitor who, where, how long, all of these different parameters that we set with the individuals that are involved in the simulation. So I hope that answers the question or makes sense.
I think so. So there's another question here. So this student who's asking the next question, Morgan, was in the class. So we tried to do this, but we apparently are not social enough because nobody had any contact. Like there were 10 of us and we never came into contact with each other because, well, Dr. Vincent and I are like real paranoid. And so we stay in our own bubbles like everybody did. So the student Morgan was in the class. She was healthy. She never interacted with anyone who wasn't healthy. Of the 10 of us, probably too small a group. And so she's asking if we can do it at a larger scale at our university.
Oh, yeah.
And yes, Morgan, we want to, which is part of why we have Todd here today to convince us all that we should participate in this really cool experience to learn. Yes.
Yeah. And, you know, and ultimately, and I know we've talked about this, ultimately, it would be fantastic to have different schools, different classes, different summer camps, whatever it may be, run it simultaneous. So depending on how immersive you want it to be, because the basic level is, you know, we pick how long, we pick what pathogen, you know, all that good stuff. We give you the code and you just download the app and just do your thing. And then at the end, we collect, you know, we have all this information that we can turn over to you and you can play with the data, all this good stuff. You know, but then we can get to next level things like, you know, having a specific location for people that are playing that want to get vaccinated. You know, you have to go out and actually get your QR code and get vaccinated. You want to get tested. We can do all these different layers of complexity. But the bottom line is, just like you were saying, you know, the more the merrier, right? You have 10 people and you're socially distanced all the time. In the real world, it's the same thing, right? You should be safe in your bubble. But you know, when all of a sudden you have 500 people or 400 people like we just saw that are not socially distanced, you start to get a very good picture of what that actually does and how quickly it moves and things of that nature, which is vital. Because changing behavior is tough unless the behavior that you're trying to change, you can see yourself. You can go, holy cow, I had no idea. And that's hugely important.
Dr. Brown? Oh.
No, go, Lindsay. I was going to encourage you to speak, so please do.
No, I've extended this invitation to some of our educator friends and some of the Gear Up team that's in the network, whose kids will have access this summer. Can you speak to some of the skills and competencies that the students and teachers are going to acquire after going through the simulations and doing this work?
Yeah. You know what? Because I like sharing my screen. Hold on. I want to show you because this isn't as crazy as the serial killer thing. Hold on, but this is something that we need to understand from a teaching standpoint, an education standpoint. It'll take me a second. Give me 2 seconds here. So we're good? Yes, we can see? Okay, so let me just show you, and I just flew through this real quick, but I'm going to go back because when you're talking about that, when we're talking about cross-curricular or hybrid now has a different meaning by virtue of hybrid meaning online, in-person things. Cross-curricular lessons, you know, when I see a meeting, like this is a perfect example of, okay, teachers are getting together and we're going to figure out how we can do things together and work with one another for a specific lesson. When I see these things, this is how I see, unfortunately, this is how I kind of see the world. So this is that same meeting right here, and I'll explain what I'm talking about. So when you have, a lot of times cross-curricular lessons, you see this. You have a subject where you have information dumped in the subject specific to whatever you're trying to teach. And then you have another subject, and they do the same thing, and another subject. The problem becomes this part, where you have a lot of times where kids get data dump, no idea the connection. Data dump, no idea the connection. Data, you see what I mean? So you get this undulating path or curve. So you get all kinds of information about whatever you're teaching in language arts or math, but they don't understand how these connect with the same subject. And what you get is this mentality of kids that go, hold on a second, I thought that we were in math now. Why are we talking about history? Or why are we talking about communication in math? That doesn't make sense. And you start to compartmentalize it. And even though it's hybrid and you're teaching, or even though it's cross-curricular and you're teaching the same topic, you're teaching it within the confines of your own subject and you're not combining or really I mean, you want to elevate these. You want to what we call flatten the curve. We want to get this undulation much flatter so we can see not only are we getting the information per subject, but this is, you start to get a little bit, you start to flatten the curve and we start to have more connection between the subjects so they understand how to relate the two subjects and how one is important to the other. I do it all the time. I do it in civics. We talk about percentages, whatever. People go, "Oh, what are we talking about math in here for? This is history." No. They're all the same. They really are. So from a giant overview of a skill set with what we're talking about, I mean, communication, that's gigantic. And we see this now, right? Miscommunication or thinking I'm saying something and you're receiving what I'm saying in the same way may not actually be the case, right? We see, we've had this false dichotomy of it's either you stay healthy or we have the economy. And that's a false dichotomy. They're hand in hand. You can't have a strong economy without a robust public health system. And you can't have a robust public health system unless you've got money in the economy pumping to help research and things of that nature. So how you communicate that is important. So that's some of the things that you can learn, the connection between different subject areas and the importance of that. So there's not as much dip of, oh, well, that was just what I learned about in math. No, we're learning this and how each subject fits into it. That's something to think about. The other thing is conflict management or conflict resolution. Everybody knows everything until they get into a room and they're like, hold on a second. And it's funny, we watch people, like for instance, when we do this at a high scale, we have government members that are responsible for funding different groups throughout the outbreak simulation in middle school, high school. And the understanding of compromise and understanding how to debate and how to get your point across through proper communication and understanding, it's totally a different world than, because it's real world, right? Things like that, things about, selfishness is amazing. How many times we've had vaccine developed in the simulation and immediately people are like, well, I want it first. That's human nature, right? I wanted protection first. Okay, so, but how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this from an equity standpoint? How are we going to do this that best cuts transmission chains off, things of that nature? Decision-making, huge decision-making in a specific time period. Hey, listen, we've got to go. We've got a certain amount of time. This has to get done. So you've got a little bit of amplified pressure. So they have to start to think on their feet. That's important to understand. I'll give you a quick example. One simulation, our government wanted to get people quarantined, and the general public did not care. They were not going to be quarantined. They were not going to do it. So the government said, you know what? Told the military to round up the general population and tell them that we have a cure for this pathogen. Only if you quarantine will we give you the cure. So they did. All these people got together, quarantined. That wasn't true at all. The government was lying to get people to do what they wanted them to do. Was that right to do? Debatable depending on the situation. But what ends up happening is the media in the simulation gets wind that it's a lie. So the media makes the decision to tell the people in the quarantine that, listen, you're being lied to. This isn't true. They're manipulating you. So quarantine is broken. Everything goes crazy. Nobody trusts the government. All of these things are happening. And that's within a 7th grade simulation. So you have all these different, I have this information. Is that for the public good to tell them? How do I, trust? These are bigger things that you don't teach in school a lot of times. And if you do, you need that experiential learning. You need that opportunity to engage with one another. And the kids will surprise you. They will come up with some really amazing things and really amazing ideas if you allow them to do it. So those are, I don't know if that answered it, but there's a lot of different moving parts that can be tied into real life. And that's really important.
So there are a few other questions from the audience I want to make sure we get to. So Kristen asked, Operation Outbreak had vaccines added to it. Is the simulation a general new disease or has it been tailored to COVID-19? I think you sort of mentioned that it's adaptable to different diseases with different transmission, modes of transmission and rates of transmission.
Yeah, so ultimately, what we're moving towards is creating, having a website in which we can help you build it, picking which one you would like, or low touch to where you go, okay, here are the 6 pathogens that are available. I want this one. This is how many people we have. We're going to be inside, and this is how long it's going to be. And it'll basically put all that together, build the app or build that simulation. We can give you the code, and you can run it. And then the dashboard's being built in real time. The other thing we can do is actually have you create your own. So you could create something based off of, something real or totally imaginary. I can tell you right now, we get middle school kids and you're like, okay, build your own. Everybody wants to kill everybody as fast as possible. But there's learning involved in that, right? So I want it to be as horribly, the mortality is just terrible. But then all of a sudden it burns itself out because the mortality was so high and the transmission was so low. Kids start to understand, oh, so now I see why transmission.
Yeah, that's not a very good infectious disease if it kills its host so quickly.
Exactly. And that's the thing. What we would do too is sometimes to get kids thinking is go build it. And they build it and they have these horrible, just impossible things and go, okay, great. Now you need to stop it. So what you just built, how do you fix it? And then it's like, whoa, hold on a second. Now I have to think about it from the opposite side, right? And that's so. But to answer your question, yeah, we can build it, or you can pick from diseases or pathogens that are in existence. Absolutely.
So sort of to follow that, I guess the student asks, have you thought about utilizing the app for contact tracing? Maybe people could manually assign their symptoms and the app can notify others who come in contact before and after a positive diagnosis while keeping the security and privacy of individuals. This is like, there's that app now that the state is pushing, the COVID defense, or is that what it's called? Is that it? Lindsay, do you know? I downloaded it, but I don't interact with anybody. So but if I do, and I think it's also like they have the app. If you come into contact with somebody who has the app and told the people they were positive, then you would be notified that you actually have had a contact. So
yeah, we have a whole platform like that already. Yeah, so it's and you can opt in, basically telling you can identify yourself within your cohort so people know that you may be positive or that you tested positive, or you can stay anonymous. And we've also tied it into things like testing, right? So I have symptoms. The system has been notified, and there's 4 testing sites within an hour drive. Which ones are at what capacity, so I know which one to go to instead of driving, being like, oh, geez, now I got to sit here for 2 hours. There's a lot of that going on. We've already built that, and we've been running that for, almost a year now. Yeah, and that's more of a separate situation. But yeah, we can do that.
Todd, there was one more question about higher ed partnerships and running the app with other universities. Can you speak to that, and if there were any findings or any evidence that running it affected the spread?
Yeah, so the university that I just showed actually they had a massive COVID outbreak, and people started testing positive within 3 days of that Halloween weekend. Obviously, watching what happened in our simulation, we predicted that. We're like, okay, so listen, university, this is what happened over the Halloween weekend, and you're going to see this. So you're going to see that we can anticipate this happening. And that is something that is definitely beneficial. And we are in the process of doing that more and more. We have three more universities that within the next month will be running the same type situation with hopefully as many or more people. And we can be able to, again, it's about behavior. Right, we can start to understand how communication and education and information actually change behavior or not at all, and that's a big component that we need to really, really buckle down on, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping we'll try it again. We should do it now before all those kids leave for Mardi Gras.
Yeah, really.
Send it home with them and see what if well, they're all the friends at home would have to have it too, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's the power of technology is amazing. What we can do and how we can what kind of data we can get out of all of this. But the limitation of technology is, you have to use it.
So I guess to follow up on that question, I think it was part of it. Like, so you could predict that they were about to see an outbreak because people hung out with like hundreds of people when they weren't supposed to. Did those people then, those students, because they saw that, was there a change in behavior at that university, or you didn't track it anymore, so you don't know, but maybe the administration saw that we spiked, but then we got it under control, like we made a bigger effort to educate or we locked down or whatever?
Yeah, and what's amazing about it is we are also running the contact tracing, the scout information or sentinel information, like I was telling you with the testing and all that. We're running that simultaneously in the university, so then you can compare, right? You can go, okay, so this happened in the simulation, this is what it led to in the real world, but this is what the data from the real world showed. So now we can start to really, it's not causation, but we can start to see some correlation between the data that our app is showing based on behavior and the pathogen and what actually is occurring. And that's something that's important, because then that makes that data so much more important and more robust, right? Because we can show that in this simulation, this is what more than likely is going to happen within a certain range of certainty. So that gives us a better understanding of how to, it really can inform policy, right? And it can inform science communication and things of that nature. So that's really what we're looking to do, is not only as an individual or as a school, because we can use the app to, we could also use the app to test mitigation strategies, right? Just run the app for 3-4 days. And now we can see if your quote unquote mitigation strategies within your school, your university are actually working. And if they don't, we can see why they're not working, what's not working, and to what degree it is or not working. So here's some of the modifications. And that's that whole health score. As an individual, then we can turn around and go, not only are you getting an individual health score or health card, you're also getting that for the university or the school. They can look and go, oh, geez, this is what we scored. This is what we need to do to change that. So that's, information is important.
Yeah, yeah. Are there other questions from the audience? We have just a few minutes left, and I feel I've monopolized. I think Todd and I could talk for hours here.
Yeah, maybe I'll show the video real quick.
Yeah, that would be super.
Let me, gosh, where the heck am I? Yeah, let me.
Yeah, and those on this who have been at other seminars know that I really love interdisciplinary education and finding ways to connect what people are learning in a way that's applicable. So I think this is a really great example of that.
Yeah, so here's a couple of minute video of one of the simulations we ran at our middle school in Sarasota Military Academy Prep, and it'll give you kind of a feel of what the atmosphere is like, but what is actually going on as we conduct the simulation. So here you go. 4 years ago, we decided to have a public health unit looking at how the government and different organizations, the military, and even the media that gets involved when something like this were to occur. It was right on the cusp of the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. It was very prevalent in the media, and we thought, you know what, why don't we do something in the schools, because we're getting so many questions from the kids about it. So we decided to elevate the lessons and move into this experiential learning situation where the kids not only learn about it, but they actually get to have almost like a live action adventure game in trying to solve the problem.
You can start to see patterns in how people behave, how they sometimes cooperate, how they sometimes work against each other in different ways. I mean, how the chaotic environment is out there.
I'm patient zero and I'm infecting everyone. It's a secret. You can't tell me.
But ultimately, I think the students have always impressed me year after year with how diligent they are, how much they respond, and everyone's working together to try to help the individuals infected and the community at large while they try to find cure.
First year, the survival rate was about 25%. The following year, I think 2 people out of 200. So it was not a good year.
Last year was the first class that actually would consider a win. They was at 51%. They barely made it. So we're hoping that this year will be better.
Dr. Brown, we set up the game with simulation by adding the economy and students having to kind of buy food, for example, to keep themselves alive, but at the same time, you have to avoid getting infected. So all of this complexity will make it super interesting to see, to watch it unfold.
Dr. Sabetti is literally one of the greatest human beings I ever lived. When I emailed Dr. Sabetti, she emailed me back, which is amazing in itself. Before we know it, we're having discussions by email. I asked if she would be willing to Skype with her team, and then we put this together, and then I send everything to her and show her kind of what we did, and she says, oh my gosh, I want to be involved in this. And then she's really taken a leadership role, which is amazing for a middle school, thousands of miles away from Harvard. But she's taken this leadership role, and as you know, she's on campus, and she's really involved with the entire layout of the outbreak itself.
I am a computational geneticist. I run a lab of about 40 folks that are all working towards developing tools to help us in human health, particularly responses to outbreaks. Last year, we implemented the mobile app for the first time so that we could actually spread a virus over phones. And then this year, we're adding beacons that can show hotspots of infection or vaccinations, just ways of essentially signaling different turns that are happening in the outbreak. We also want to make sure that we can replicate what's really going on during an outbreak.
We wanted to make this experience very engaging for students, so they feel that there's a real danger to it. So the actual rate of kind of recovery is not that high. So it's a very dangerous thing.
Yes, so that's just a quick video of, and they mention things like, again, complexity, putting in an economic model. So you have families with a certain amount of money and certain things cost a certain amount of money, so you have to start making economic decisions based on what you have or don't have, what you have to save for, and things like that. So that's a whole nother, again, level of complexity that ties in economics into the equation with the general population. And that changes behavior, believe it or not.
I've got one more question, and then
Sure.
I'll let you go unless Lindsay's got another one to follow. One more. Did you happen to, these kids that did this like 5 years ago, any chance you contacted them or know how they're faring given that they were like exposed to this type of a situation?
Yeah, we a lot of them, we stay in touch. I actually just spoke about a month or so ago, I can't keep track of time in this world, at the Earth Institute for Columbia University with one of my students, former students. And we talked about that, and we talked about how much mirroring we're seeing in the public as they did, however many years ago. And she actually was part of it, and then she would come back every year to help out from different sides. And I definitely stay in touch. And it's that I get emails pretty consistently with an article. Of somebody doing something, you're like, oh my gosh, this is exactly like, whoever did this in our simulation in 2017. Yeah, they get it. And that's the important thing. They get it. They understand what should be done, what's not being done, how they should behave. That's the important thing.
Mm-hmm. All right, Lindsay, you can wrap it up with your last question.
So no doubt there are people on this call that want to do cool things with you, Dr. Brown, like Dr. Newman and I get to, with schools, with universities, or just individually. So what is your capacity? How many people can be part of this? And how do they get to you to become part of this work and tap into your network and just the cool opportunities associated?
Yeah, I mean, my capacity question, it's probably a lot lower than I think it is, because it's hard to say no. So at this point, we are looking towards summer and then fall of having a massive rollout of this program all over the country. We're expecting well over 100 schools to be involved, and we're getting there pretty quick for the fall. So,
Do you save a spot for us?
oh yeah, totally. Yeah, like we have a spring moratorium, and it's at Tech, Louisiana. You're involved. Please take part in this. Because again, you can be the guinea pigs, if you want to call it that, the ground floor of learning what works, what doesn't work, what can be manipulated, what needs to be added. This is a living, breathing program. I mean, we don't know everything by any means. We would love to get, the people that are interested in helping and being part of this as much as doing it, if you want to call it that, and bringing different opportunities to their students in a really engaging way. And this is, again, this is just one facet of a bigger program. So there's a lot of different things that are going on, a lot of moving parts. So, if you can always email me through our Operation Outbreak website. It's operationoutbreak.org, or contact anybody, I guess Jamie or Lindsay at Tech. Please email me. We are looking for people that want to be involved, and we are looking for, politically diverse, socioeconomically diverse. I mean, we're trying to get all facets of everybody involved, because that's going to give us, again, give everybody more information to how to handle things like we're seeing now, and that's hugely important. We don't, and Lindsay and Jamie, I know they hear this. I do not like trying to create future leaders. I think that's goofy.
I know I've really tried to watch my words today and never say future or tomorrow. It is right now.
Yes. What are we waiting for? Let's do it now. Let's get some leaders. Let's give opportunity to kids to screw up and learn right now. Not when they're like 45 and it's really important. Let's get them leading and doing things now. That's huge. So yeah, please contact me, and we can get rolling.
Dr. Brown, that was your opportunity to tell them to take your class. We're trying to talk you into teaching for teachers in the fall too. I was setting you up right there to help recruit for that really awesome class we want you to teach.
And I apparently have no idea. I totally dropped that. Yeah, so we'll rewind and do that again. Yes, it's going to change your entire life for the better. I'm telling you, mind-blowing stuff. I'm telling you. I've got a whole model of how to create a new class for all schools that'll help enhance test scores of all the other classes by this one class. I'm telling you.
Is that a promise?
$2,000.
Is there a cap on that class?
No, please. No more than 1 million people. No, seriously. More. Listen, we have to make change. We have to make change now. So we're not sitting here a year, 2 years, 5 years, 8 months, whatever, and saying, "Gosh, we should have done whatever." Let's go. That's important.
Well, I've got a proposal for you and Lindsay for later. I've got a group of students to run this with in the spring. It's going to be good.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah, that's going to be. I'm excited.
Cool. Well, I really appreciate you doing this. I think the 70 plus people who were on also did. I'll just speak for them. There are some nice thank yous in here, so I believe it.
Good. Thank you.
Really, really great. Thank you so much, and look forward to our continued projects together.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your time. Hopefully I didn't give anybody too much of a headache, and if so, there's nothing you can do about it now. So yeah, definitely thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. All right, Todd, let me run my idea by